Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Wednesday, the 14th of August. I'm Stephen Ridgway. It's all about patches today, so somewhat boring, I suppose. Patch and be damned, as always. So let me see. 90 Microsoft CVEs have been addressed in this month's Microsoft Patch Tuesday release. 6 of these are known to be currently exploited. 4 others, I think exploits are known about but haven't been seen in the wild. So, no, I'm not going to read you a list of 90 CVEs. You can read it yourself if you're that interested. But the 6 that are under exploitation, 2024, 38189, which is Microsoft Project Remote Code Execution Vulnerability with a CVSS rating of 8.8, so pretty serious. 38178, Scripting Engine Memory Corruption Vulnerability with CVSS score of 7.5. 38193, Windows Ancillary Function Driver for WinSock, elevation of privilege vulnerability, score of 7.8. 38106 is a Windows kernel elevation of privilege vulnerability. Excuse me. A rating of 7. 38107, Windows Power Dependency Coordinator elevation of privilege, Windows Mark of the Web Secure Feature Bypass out there being fixed. So definitely apply the patches from Microsoft as soon as you can. As always, run them through stand-up testing will be my recommendation, and then push them out. Stage it across your environment, but don't take your time. Adobe has also pushed out patches for 71 CVEs. So there are 11 updates covering 71 CVEs across Illustrator, Dimension, Photoshop, InDesign, Acrobat and Reader, Bridge, Substance 3D Stager, Commerce, InCopy, 3D Sampler, and Substance 3D Designer products. If you're using Adobe stuff, check that you are up to date. That's quite a bunch of vulnerabilities that are being fixed. SAP has also pushed out security updates, 25 patches or updated security patches. So maybe patching patches here. I'm not sure. Not being so. Does anybody actually use SAP anymore? No, rhetorical question. Don't answer that. One of them, CVE 2024 41730, has got a CVSS rating of 9.8, and it's related to a denial of service vulnerability in the SAP Business Objects Business Intelligence platform. So if you are using SAP products, definitely look into these. Again, getting all this stuff from a very good article in the Register, which summarises these things very nicely for us. So read the article, which will link to the briefing if you are using any of these particular products. And then also in this article, they point out that Intel has patched 43 security issues, plugging multiple holes in software and hardware. 9 of these are rated as high severity flaws, including Intel Ethernet controller and adapters patches, escalation of privilege and denial of service. They patched bugs in the Intel NUC BIOS. I don't know, do you call it NUC or NUC? I'm not sure. BIOS firmware. addressing escalation of privilege and denial of service and information disclosure. Vulnerabilities in Intel Core Ultra processor and Intel processor stream cache mechanisms that allow for escalation of privilege. Vulnerabilities in Intel's trust domain extensions, Intel TDX module, denial of service in that one. There is a vulnerability in the SMI transfer monitor, STM, that allows for escalation of privilege, and various flaws in the Intel, I think it's pronounced Agilex FPGA firmware, and Intel server board S2600 ST family firmware. Escalation of privileges have been patched there, and finally some Intel UEFI integrator tools on Aptio V for Intel NUC are vulnerable to escalation of privilege bugs. So, as with all things Intel, the patches may involve firmware updates or generally messing about, so not necessarily the easiest things to deal with. However, definitely worth keeping on top of these things. A little bit more complicated than pushing out patches from Microsoft, I agree, but it is something that is worth building a process around in your organization, because anything at that level is pretty fundamental, and once compromised or exploited, once these vulnerabilities are exploited and devices are compromised, they tend to lead to a very low level of access, which is harder to detect from higher up in the stack. Also, on the subject of patches being pushed out, there is an article, an alert from CISA, which is the US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or as they describe themselves, America's Cyber Defense Agency. They're pretty damn good at what they do. If they're pushing out alerts or advisories, you can be pretty certain that these things do need to be considered or addressed. So they're concerned at the moment about Ivanti. They note that Ivanti has released security updates to address multiple vulnerabilities in Ivanti Avalanche, Neurons for ITSM, and Virtual Traffic Manager. These vulnerabilities could be used to take control of an infected system. They quote Ivanti as advising users to reduce their attack surface, even follow industry best practice, and adhering to Ivanti's network configuration guidance to restrict access to the management interface of these devices. There are 3 security updates linked from the CISA article to the Ivanti notifications. If you are using any of those products, definitely recommendation to have a look at these and apply patches as and when they are available or applicable to what you're doing, and also have a think about network architecture. Management interfaces, by the way, as was common before the whole let's just flatten the network approach kicked off 10 years ago. Micro-segmentation, as it's now called, well, just segment stuff to make it make sense. Consider having a secure management or an administration VLAN into which you put all of these management interfaces so that they're not on the management interfaces for any of the devices that you're looking after. So this is more aimed at people that run on-prem stuff. Although, interestingly, we'll probably talk about it at some point. We are seeing a trend to reconsider cloud migration, and we know of various organisations that are thinking about bringing stuff back to Colo. Mostly based on cost that gets the discussion going. But once you get past the cost, securing things in cloud is at least as hard, if not harder, than securing things where you can point at it. So there are some very interesting discussions going on in that space. But if you are running things in your own environments and you do run your own networks or data centers, do consider the fact that if you put all of the management interfaces for all of the devices that are in there into a secure VLAN and restrict access to that VLAN quite tightly down to specific administrative devices, and those devices are then not able to get to the internet, blah, 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 you eliminate quite a raft of exploitable management interface type vulnerabilities. Cisco, in this case, Avanti, various other devices as well. So think about that from a network architecture perspective. Right, and then finally from me today, NIST has finalised a trio of post-quantum encryption standards. Why does this matter? Well, we know that current encryption standards are unlikely to be resilient or able to resist quantum computer decryption attacks. For a long time, NIST, okay, US government standards, okay, but they are well funded and actually really do know what they're talking about. So, it's worth listening to what they've got to say in this space. But they have, since I think 2016, been working with mathematicians and relevant groups in the US to come up with algorithms which will resist attacks from quantum computing. Well, 3 of them they now think are good enough to develop going forward. So one of them is intended for general encryption, as in moving data across public networks. The other 2 are dealing with secure digital signatures, so basically authentication, online identity. So there are some various other algorithms which are getting close to moving forward into the next round of testing and development. Do we care? Well, yeah. Firstly, if certainly these 3 algorithms are very unlikely now to go away. So as NIST rightly point out, we don't want to wait till the point when quantum computing is actively decrypting older encryption algorithms, has compromised older encryption algorithms, and then start migrating to quantum resistant algorithms. So the advice is begin to plan. You can use these algorithms as they are now. But begin to plan this migration. Don't wait for the event. Effectively the critical event has been demonstrated well enough in the critical event is not, it is happening in the wild. It's too late for you by now. So begin to look at this. Right, so we've got to bear in mind that the concept, the background to all of this is that adversaries of the West, including Russia and China, are pumping significant resources into quantum computing test beds. So they're taking this seriously. And then I think also very interestingly, these nations and possibly others are stealing as much encrypted data as they can now. and storing it until the technology exists to break encryption. Okay, so there's a really important concept behind this, which is definitely worth reiterating, because I don't hear it talked about. I don't see much evidence of people like basically getting it with this. But the encryption is not a eternal solution to data protection. Okay, so the value, if you measure the value lifetime of a piece of information, okay, depending on the type of information, it has a different value lifetime. By which I mean, okay, let's take a really good example of this. You are aware that a particular company is going to float on the stock market at a particular time. Okay. That information is not public information, and were it to leak out, would provide people with an unfair advantage from trading the shares. Okay. That information is only valuable up until the point when the public declaration is made that the actions are going to be undertaken. So, it's going to float, or it's going to merge, or whatever, whatever it may be. So let's say that piece of information has value for the 9 months building up to whatever this event is. Okay. After that time, it doesn't matter, because it happened, and it's public knowledge anyway. So that's absolutely fine. The market adjusts, blah, 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 all the usual things. Before that, if you knew about this, you could engage in what's generally considered insider trading and become very rich very quickly. Yeah. So encryption of that piece of information needs to resist attacks that would take less than 9 months of brute force. That's just as an example. Okay. Other pieces of information have got much, much longer term value. I've started down this path without actually having thought of an example of a piece of information that has extremely long-term value. But let's say satellite defense systems, inner workings. Well, those things are going to be, the satellite defense systems are going to be up in the sky for a very long time. How they work matters, because you don't want your adversaries understanding how they work and then developing specific targeted attacks on them, for example. In which case, then, that information needs to be resistant to cryptographic attack that is over a much longer period of time, tens of years, decades, whatever it might be. Okay, so why does this matter? Well, the fact is that the stuff that people have encrypted with very strong algorithms now, which are not breakable in anything approaching real time. We're back to multiple lifetimes, millions of years, those sorts of things for some of the best algorithms that are kicking around at the moment, given current computing power. Quantum computing will turn that on its head and will reduce those things down to seconds, milliseconds, whatever it might be, to decrypt this stuff. So if you want state secrets, but you can only get them in an encrypted form right now, take them anyway and store them, because within X years, certainly within a decade, you'll be able to push a button and decrypt that stuff. So why does this all matter? It matters because you need to think about what it is you're storing and how you protect it. If your data value lifetime is short, it probably doesn't matter. So long as you're using good algorithms now, the fact that we're on the cusp of this quantum thing doesn't really matter. If, however, you are storing data which has long-term value, do think very seriously about how to protect your encrypted data, as well as how do you encrypt the data. So the encryption protects the data, but you need to protect the encrypted data from being stolen. So don't think of encryption as being the thing you need and then it's all okay, because if it gets nicked, it doesn't matter. Well, it will do at some point in the future. So there we are. That's something to think about. Definitely, if you deal with data which is highly sensitive, commercially sensitive, in the longer term, whatever it may be, begin to think about how to migrate to quantum resistant encryption algorithms, because you want to be ahead of the game in this space. Definitely playing catch up will put you in a very, very weak position in the future, in my clearly not so humble opinion. Anyway, that's enough from me for today. Middle of the week. Hope you have a good